All of this hubbub over this moment with Rachel and Evita is really a matter at the end of the day of whether or not you vibe with Jamie Lloyd's artistic and directorial style, because that's what this is. It's a little insulting to assume that if you didn't love this directorial choice, it was because you didn't understand it, how perfect the symbolism was, as opposed to being aware that that moment that everyone's talking about is actually part of a directorial shtick, not in a bad way. Here's that same device being used in Sunset Boulevard. Also, as a former Broadway performer, I just have to say I imagine that on certain days this walk is kind of annoying. The point I'm making is that it is an interesting part of a larger conversation regarding, the direction that theater is moving and what makes theater theater. Jamie Lloyd's work can be very polarizing, These really Spartan, modern takes, immersive integration of technology. And like I'm always saying, sometimes it can be both, meaning that just because something's a gimmick to a certain degree doesn't mean that it doesn't work beautifully and effectively sometimes. I personally think that this is brilliant, works perfectly, super effective. But the thing that I actually like the most about it is how from the inside, the spectators become part of the performance. That's what's interesting to me about this moment. Also, the fact that we've all seen Evita a million times, but how many times have you gotten to actually see a POV of what she is seeing? Brings another dynamic and depth and dimension to the experience. Unlike here, where although it was undoubtedly super badass, I think it was really cool, it wasn't nearly as effective and necessary for me. And that is a subjective opinion that we're all gonna feel differently about. I just see so many people in the comments trying to explain to people why this makes sense. And it's just kind of again, I love this moment, but sometimes there are even deeper conversations. Sometimes I really love Jamie Lloyd's works, and sometimes I don't so much. And I think that that's something we also forget we're allowed to do. And we could talk about this all day, really. But one of the main concerns I will say that people bring up when you talk about works of people like Jamie Lloyd is that when it comes to the immersive integration of technology into theater, right, and maintaining the essence of what makes theater theater and not a movie, the idea is always for the technology to bring you closer to the story. The technology should always be there to facilitate even more intimacy that we weren't able to have in ways before between the performer and the audience member. You don't want to feel closer to the technology. You want the technology to bring you closer to the performance. You know what I'm saying? And that doesn't mean that it always has to be discreet and necessary either, that it can't be gaudy and creative and unnecessary at times, as long as it's not replacing and taking precedence over the live aspect of the performance. I don't even really have a strong opinion on Jamie Lloyd's directorial style because there's a part of me that feels like it's kind of just inevitable. Does that make sense? On a totally unrelated note, as a performer, I feel like this has to be such a trippy experience for Rachel. You can't tell me that this girl wasn't born for this.